So what goals do you have in carrying forward not only Augie's legacy, but carrying forward Augie's quest?
Well, I promised him on the day he left his body behind that we would collectively as a group continue this, because otherwise those last 19 years would be for naught.
Well, welcome everyone to Buchanan's Counting Capital podcast. I'm Robert Brunswick, chairman of Buchanan Street. Today we're going to take a bit of a pivot from our more typical investment management and broader business discussions to learn about the business of philanthropy from an entrepreneurial perspective and the unlimited, as I like to say it, ROI that those efforts can produce. For the past 20 years, I've had the great opportunity each month to have lunch, dinner, or travel with Augie Nieto, a friend and forum member, and moreover, a mentor to me in helping me build my business at Buchanan Street, and ironically becoming one of Buchanan's first investors. Unfortunately, though, I also had a front row seat to Augie's journey as he was diagnosed with amyotrophic lateral sclerosis, otherwise known more commonly as ALS, or Lou Gehrig's disease, which most men survive 3 years, women 5 years, but of course Augie lasted 18 years. Today, it's my pleasure to have as my guest Lynne Nieto, Augie's wife and co-founder and chairman now of Augie's Quest, a movement and an organization to come up with a cure for ALS. As Augie would often say, if we're not going to come up with a cure, then who is? Lynne is more than just a co-founder, as she has been the voice for this movement as Augie lost his. Let's meet Lynne and get to know her journey and more about Augie's Quest. Hello, Lynne. It's so great to have you on the podcast. This is a real treat for me, and I appreciate you wanting to join. So welcome.
Thank you for the invitation. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. So I think it'd be nice for our listenership to, first of all, maybe have a sense for your life and business career prior to your role today at Augie's Quest. And if I'm recalling correctly, you started in the real estate business. So tell us a little bit about your background.
Well, I joined straight out of college. I had 2 days from graduation to get in the office of a company that my father started in the late 60s. My ex-husband and I both worked there. I was there for over 20 years. We were tract home builders originally, and then over the years started building R2 and apartments and office buildings and shopping centers that we still hold today. I have been retired since 2000. Yeah, 2000. Shortly before we were diagnosed. So it was sort of a blessing in disguise that I retired at that point in time.
So before we get into Augie's Quest and your activities, I think we have a lot of our listeners are part of family businesses or part of families. What was that like to work within a family business, and just observations you might have from that experience?
I would say 90% of the time it was a very positive experience. It was a great opportunity. You worked really hard to kind of prove yourself so you didn't look like the kids here. But as you know, with a lot of entrepreneurs, it's my way or the highway. And my father and I kind of came to know that both of us weren't going to be happy. And it was more important to me to have a father than to have a boss that I was angry at. So I left the firm voluntarily, but really missed it. It was a painful thing to do, but I know it was the right thing to do.
Sure. Well, I think this maybe kind of ties in a bit, if you will, with not your first meeting of Augie, and I think that'd be fun for everyone to hear about, but just your next chapter and kind of reconnecting with Augie and then ultimately getting married to him. Can you share a little bit about the Augie history and of the relationship?
So Augie and I were high school sweethearts. in Anaheim, and not the nice part of Anaheim. It was, we were high school sweethearts. We broke up because Claremont and Irvine were so darn far away from each other to where we went to college. And we ultimately ended up marrying our college sweethearts. Augie was actually a bridesmaid in my first wedding, along with my brother. So we kept in touch over the years. It was good that we didn't stay together. He needed to mellow out. I probably did too.
Right.
I'm not admitting to that. But and then 29 years ago, we got back together and got married.
Well, what a marriage, what a team, what a relationship. I had a chance to watch you two together, and it was certainly a good a good team. And I think as we think about kind of getting folks who are listening today to maybe understand Augie, and you had a very unique vantage point, of course, at a lot of different levels. And just to remind me, 29 years married,
Yes.
and more than half of that.
Actually, no, actually 28, just short of 28 before he passed, 18 of which we lived with ALS.
Right. So I was just going to say that you live with ALS more during your marriage than without. So certainly an interesting perspective. But how would you describe Augie? Have our listenership get to know him through your words, and then kind of maybe move into what was his business, and because it's the ironies shouldn't be lost on anybody here.
Well, when we were in high school, I always thought I was much smarter than he was. He was always the guy in the back of the class goofing off, getting in trouble. I was the studious one in the front of the class. And so then not that we lost touch, but then he went on to, while he was at Claremont, he founded Life Fitness, which is, or was, I don't know if it is today, the world's largest fitness equipment manufacturer. He started out with a life cycle, and he sold it, or attempted to sell it, to the gyms early on, and was not terribly successful, but finally got some traction, and then went on to build Life Fitness. He was tenacious, I think is probably the best word that's not negative, but he was really tenacious and wouldn't take no for an answer. We laugh about that even today at Augie's Quest, like no means maybe or probably so, was that kind of the way he looked at life. I used to tease him. I said, I don't think I agreed to marry you, but I don't know how we got here. It's like, um, but he was tenacious. He was driven. He came from nothing. He built the business. He sold it multiple times and bought it back, and ultimately retired from the business probably 3 years prior to diagnosis. He went back and tried to start yet another company that was in the weight loss. And about the time that he was going to have to use other people's monies, it was one of the things that I was most proud of him about, is we had put our personal money into this business, and he was going to go probably to the next tranche of money. It was probably you, Robert, was probably part of that. And I'll never forget, he sat in the kitchen one morning and goes, I can't do it. I can't take somebody else's money because I'm not certain I'm going to be successful. And it kind of tells you the kind of guy he was.
I think there has this conversation about Augie the man and his prior skills and his success in entrepreneurship, I think lends itself to many of the things that you both have accomplished as a team with Augie's Quest. But maybe before we go there, so when was Augie first diagnosed with ALS? And what can you give us a little more of a description medically, if you can? What is ALS?
So ALS is a neurodegenerate disease that affects the voluntary muscles of the body. What ultimately usually kills most people is your breathing, your diaphragm becomes paralyzed and you can no longer breathe. In Augie's case, he chose to go on a ventilator at about 10 years. Most people can't A, afford it, or B, just don't have the quality of life that he did. And so he was able to survive almost 18 years with the disease, which is very, very rare. But it just, in most cases, it starts in the limbs, either the arms or the legs. Augie was the arms. In some other cases, it's called bulbar. It starts in the mouth, and it tends to spread quicker to the chest and diaphragm area, and is typically quite a faster progression disease. Most people die 2 to 5 years. Most people don't do any life. What is the word for it?
Extending, or yeah.
Extending. So, feeding tubes. Augie was like the mechanical wonder of all time. He had so many things, but he also had a quality of life that I think most people don't. He was able to communicate all up to the end, albeit slowly, by using his feet to control his computer. And he had a special software. We had multiple people that helped us out through the years to make his wheelchair be able to use the equipment with his feet. So we had it a lot better than 99.9% of people that have been diagnosed with the disease.
Lynn, he remained relevant. He remained engaged, and on business boards, in doing business, doing investments with his friends. So, talk a little bit about that. How important that to him as he continued to make a difference in the world?
Well, I think if you think about it, if you were no longer physically the man that you are today, what do you have left? And in his case, his intellect.
Right.
He was brilliant. He was, as much as I used to give him a hard time about it, he was a brilliant man that had a lot to offer. And so in that blessing of having to slow down a little bit, or a lot actually, and be thoughtful about what you're going to say, thoughtful about what you're going to advise somebody to do, that gave him a super big purpose in life. I think without that, he would not have survived.
It's interesting because you think about IQ, EQ. To your point, Augie had high IQ and street smarts, but what I saw blossom in this chapter for him was his growth of his EQ,
Mm-hmm.
his awareness of other people's thoughts and feelings, and he had to just dial down some things that maybe were more historically natural for him. And that kind of brings me to my next question, knowing him so well and knowing the profile. How did he cope with this diagnosis, and what were the early days like when he knew what he was facing?
Well, he didn't cope with it very well. He went into I don't know if deep depression is the right word, but 3 months into the diagnosis, took a handful of pills, and I don't believe to this day he really intended to kill himself, because he was too smart. He didn't think it out. I think it was just desperation, hadn't slept. He was in the hospital at Hoag for 3 days. And interestingly, he was on suicide watch there. And so I would be in the room chatting with the person that was the suicide watch person. And he, for all intents and purposes, seemed to be completely out of it. When he finally came out of it, he knew everything we had said. So it was just interesting. So if you go visit somebody in the hospital and ever think that they don't know what's going on, you better be careful about what you say. But after that, I think he was so happy to be alive. It was a horrible time, but it was a blessing in disguise, sort of.
Yeah, it's interesting. I like the way you frame that. It was almost a kick in the butt for him, and I'm going to get it wrong, but was Austin one of those people that maybe were talking in the room that Augie could hear? I remember there was a calling out from his son about, "Come on, bud, what are you doing?" But
That was after
remind
we
me
got
how that went.
Yeah, when we got him home from the hospital, Austin ripped him a new one. I mean, it just was, you've always been my idol. Sorry, I get choked up, but he's just like, you've always been my idol. You can't do that. You can't do that to us, and you can't do it to our family. I, on the other hand, I kind of understood it. And I told him when we were in the hospital, if he really wanted to die, I would be okay with it. I'm not certain I meant it, but at the time it seemed, I don't know, it was just such a desperate time.
Well, and maybe it was during this time as kind of to help you through it a bit, you decided to help others and take action and start Augie's Quest, if you will. Um, what was the original vision of Augie's Quest, as knowing Augie and his passion for creativity and the new? What did you all think you were going to do with this?
I'll be really honest. I was busy trying to get an elevator in our house because there's stairs everywhere. So that was my focus. Is Augie told me he wanted to die at our home, and we had to get an elevator in, or it wasn't a possibility. So that was my focus. We were approached by Shannon Shrine, who's been our president. Ever since when we were at a clinic up in San Francisco. She worked at the time for the Muscular Dystrophy Association. And her job basically was to go after high net worth individuals that are newly diagnosed. At the end of the day, that was it, and get them engaged. And so Augie, Augie and Shannon started Augie's Quest under the Muscular Dystrophy Association umbrella. And Augie had just this sweetheart deal where we got the staff with no overhead. All of the money that Augie's Quest raised was additive to what they were already investing in ALS. I forget the other three things, but it was basically we got the sweetheart deal for about 5-6 years, and then that got changed, and we left Muscular Dystrophy Association.
I think, from my experiences, the philanthropic world is a very provincial world and a lot of standardized protocols. And I think of Augie and just the way he was, and, he shook it up a little bit. And I'm curious how his entrepreneurial spirit and style enhanced this, what is otherwise a relatively staid industry, and really got Augie's Quest kind of on the map, if you will.
He really went at it basically like it was a for-profit business. He said, "Look, our donors are our investors, and we need to show them what we're going to do with it." So holding it accountable, having milestones, that was really, I think, the huge change from a lot of just give us money and we promise we'll do something good with it. That wasn't, he was more, we will be accountable and we will show you what progress we have done.
And so talk about the marketing, though, in addition, I should say, just some of the things you did to raise money and to raise awareness that were maybe outside of the typical box, and the advantages maybe you had in having such an icon as Augie in the fitness industry be able to tap into those relationships to help further your cause.
When we first got diagnosed and Augie decided to start Augie's Quest, the original, he was asked to be honored at a fitness convention, kind of a minor fitness convention. And he rallied, he wanted to make certain that he wasn't just being honored because they thought he was going to be dead in a couple of years. So he rallied some of the icons because he was very early on in the fitness industry and very influential in the industry. So he went to some of the bigger names in the industry and asked if they would back him. These are competitors. So this is what was kind of interesting. So the original bash that we did in Las Vegas, we had Lance Armstrong was there, and I'm blanking on the guy's name.
Not John Andrazik, you're talking.
But no, he wasn't there that year. But anyway, he went to the fitness industry, and basically to this day, they're supporting Augie's Quest as a industry-wide competitors, new people. That's something that's really not been done. And it's hard to do in a disease, something like ALS, where you have the Muscular Dystrophy Association, you have the telethon and the cute kids in wheelchairs. And it's hard to sell a white guy in a big wheelchair. It's no puppies. We don't, it's hard. So there's been two huge supporters of us, the fitness industry, and YPO, Young Presidents Organization, has been huge.
Well, I can remember going to a number of these fitness events and walking around with Augie in his wheelchair, and it was like, I mean, Icon was showing up and just people coming up to him, and for his notoriety, not in getting ALS, but his notoriety in the industry. So the linkage, no doubt, was a great catalyst for you all as you built Augie's Quest. And so accomplishments to date, Lynne, as you reflect on accomplishments of Augie's Quest to date, and at some point we should probably is a cure in sight? Is how do you kind of look at those metrics that were important to Augie to establish those accomplishments as you look to the real goal of coming up with a cure? So can you benchmark that for us a little bit?
Maybe a little bit of background. So Augie's Crest, we call it the fuel that fuels the engine. And the engine is the ALS Therapy Development Institute, which is the world's largest not-for-profit ALS research institute. And so Augie was also chairman of, I'll call it ALS TDI or TDI. I am now chairman of that as well. Augie's Quest funds that, and we call that the drug discovery engine.
Got it.
That's what we fund. We fund research at TDI, and we have gotten one drug. We're the only institute that's ever gotten its own drug through phase 1 trials on its own in any disease indication. That's where we show our successes. So that drug has gotten acquired by an Irvine company called Eledon. They took it through phase 2 trials. It passed even better than we expected to. They actually acquired it not for ALS, but for islet cell transplant and for kidney transplant. And we're just waiting for that to be able to get the funding to take it to phase 3. So at the Institute, we have another drug that we just got readout on that I think we'll be able to get into phase 1 trials in the next year or so. It takes a long time with drug discovery. And so that's really our focus, is those are the milestones. Augie's Quest funds those milestones.
Yeah, and obviously, to your point, the manufacturing and creating of drugs is a very expensive proposition. And so the amount of capital that you've raised to date, I mean, it's mind-boggling to think what you've done. Can you share that with us?
Augie's Quest as a standalone has raised over $95 million over the last 19 years. And TDI, which I always used to tease, and it was like, it's the royal we, whoever. Overall, we've raised $195 million collectively between the two.
Well, you're still at it. When did Augie pass?
Augie passed away February 22nd of last year.
Okay, so it's been
over a year ago.
Now it's been over a year, and you took the mantle as the chairman of the board of Augie's Quest. And, obviously you're going to bring your own style and your own contribution to it. What goals do you have in carrying forward not only Augie's legacy, but carrying forward Augie's Quest?
Well, I promised him on the day he left his body behind that we would collectively as a group continue this, because otherwise those last 19 years would be for naught. And so I am dedicated between, it's the time that I have left. This is something that I think it's important. And I meet with way too many families that have been diagnosed, and I just want to help those families in the future not have to go through what my family has gone through.
Yeah, before you brought something up that I think I know a lot of people reach out to you. So, what counsel do you provide with a newly diagnosed person with ALS, and what advice might you give to significant others and loved ones about a family member's diagnosis?
Over the years, what I've really figured out is you need to listen to what they're ready to hear. So it's it's usually they lead. I'll kind of say, look, you can ask me anything. I'm not a doctor. I know Augie's ALS. That's the only ALS I really know intimately. It's all different. And then just kind of listen to what they say. But the biggest thing that I will volunteer is if you can get caregivers when the time is appropriate, and do it sooner than later, because that was a mistake Augie and I made, that I tried to be his caregiver much, much too long. And it took a toll on our marriage. And once we had outside care, I could be his wife again.
Yeah, beautifully said. I think what we would love to hear, Lynn, is a little bit about the goals you have established going forward. Philanthropy and money raising, lots of good causes, lots of people asking for help. How do you differentiate what is in some people's minds an orphan disease, and it has less impact than maybe other causes out there? So, how are you differentiating as a business, Augie's Quest, to keep it front of mind?
Well, funny you ask that, because right now we're going through a strategic planning process, and trying to see how does Augie's Quest look going forward without Augie. And over the past year, I've been very concerned about that. But what I've come to find out is we still have support, and we have longtime supporters that have been by our side. I think we've shown that we can do results, where early on we were just saying, give us money. Come on, trust. It's Augie. Augie will do something with it. But now we've shown that our institute is viable. It knows how to move drugs through. I think your question's very good about ALS. Do people care about it? Yeah, it's not as orphan as you would think. Most people that I've talked to have some 7 degrees of separation with ALS. Uh, so I think going forward, it's not going to be as easy as it was with Augie, but I think we just have to continue to get in front of people that are young and upcoming in the fitness industry. So we're not already, because right now we're preaching to the choir. We've got the people that are going to continue to support us, and I feel good about that, but we need to get in front of others. That's kind of the question now, is how do we get people interested in making a difference in a disease that affects 30,000, or is diagnosed about 30,000 a year.
I was unaware of that. That's more significant than you would think. 30,000 new diagnoses a year. Yeah. So as you think about Augie looking down, reflecting, enjoying your continued good work for the cause and coming up with a cure, which is his and your dream, what would Augie be most proud about today regarding Augie's Quest? If he was thinking about what you're continuing to accomplish, or what was accomplished.
I had a call 2 weeks ago that on this other drug that we're bringing out of the lab, and I told Fernando, our president and CSO, that Augie would be so proud to hear that. So not only did we get one through, we've got another one that looks even more promising, and we'll have a pipeline, and we'll continue that on until we're successful. We just have to do it, because you said earlier, Augie was in a very unique situation to make a difference in a quote unquote orphan disease. And so if it's not us, who's going to do it? And I'm committed to doing that for the rest of my life.
You're going to be around, God willing, for a long time. So I know I know you, and I know the difference you're already making and will continue to make. And I think as we have a variety of listenership today, a lot of family members, younger people, um, that the business of philanthropy. And if you were to think about what advice you might give somebody who's considering a career in philanthropy, you have a staff on your team that is second to none. And I think to better understand what that path might look like from your vantage point would be interesting to hear about.
So our huge staff of 4.5 people, I'm not a staff member, I'm just a volunteer, but our small but mighty get shit done team all came from the Muscular Dystrophy Association, interestingly, and who started their careers there very young. We all Augie's Quest has is people, and that's our team. And our team's, like you said, they're second to none. But I asked Shannon, that is the president, and her suggestion would be, find something that interests you that you really would like to work in, whether it be children's services, whatever it is, but go volunteer there. See if that's something that you really would like to do long term. Be very careful about just jumping in with 2 feet. There's a lot of philanthropic organizations that are inefficient, that are spending more on their personnel than they are toward their mission. Look at their 990s, see if they're paying ridiculous salaries to their top people, but see what you're passionate about and then see what they need. So I think that's the biggest thing, is to make certain that you're not I call it feel good philanthropy, where I'm just going to write that check, makes me feel good, and I don't really care what they do with it. That's a mistake. I think we, as charitable giving people, we have a responsibility to be smart with our money. And so I think that's part of, if you're looking to go into that as a career, I wouldn't want to be part of an organization that's heavy with overhead and not really fulfilling their mission.
I think you said it well. And I think there's a misnomer about, working for not-for-profits. I mean, they're very business savvy. They all have missions. They have, I think most probably don't, but to Augie's point, and one of the things was important to him, be accountable, have metrics of performance, have outcomes, run it like a business. And I think it's a wonderful place for a young person to have a career or a life experience, especially if it can be aligned with something they're passionate about. Lynne, what have I missed today that is worthy that you want to share to our listenership about Augie's Quest, about your charge, your mission, about Augie?
Well, I think I'll just kind of about Augie. Certainly miss that guy. But I think what he taught me was, you need to leave this place, you need to leave this world a better place. It doesn't need to be huge like what Augie's done in his lifetime, but to touch people, make a difference in this world. You don't have to get a bad disease to do that. It can be as small as, I always use my grandmother, who thought I was just special. She touched my life in such a huge way. But I think if we have the opportunity to change the world in larger ways, I think that's really why we're here.
Yes. Well done. Well said. I recall Augie had a relationship with Arnold, and I happened to watch Arnold's documentary the other night, and he was talking just about this type of thing. And he says, make yourself useful. And I think about what you are now doing without Augie here, but carrying on his mission and vision. And you're more than making yourself useful. We're so appreciative of everything you're doing, and we'll continue to support you. And hopefully this podcast has brought some attention to this horrific disease and your cause, and that maybe there's folks that will join the fight for everyone's benefit. So I want to thank you for participating today. This has been fun.
Thanks for inviting me.
Yeah, we'd love to have you back to hear about more success, more drug development as that unfolds. And I just can't thank you enough.
Thanks you. Thanks, Robert.
I want to thank everybody today for participating on our Counting Capital podcast. No doubt you got many takeaways in hearing from Lynne and hearing about Augie's quest and their cause and their mission and the good work they're doing. We'll look forward to seeing you on the next Counting Capital podcast very soon.
Thank you for joining us on this episode of the Counting Capital podcast. For informational purposes only and not to be relied on in any manner as legal, business, financial, tax, or investment advice. Nothing in this episode is an offer to sell or the solicitation of an offer to buy securities. To learn more about Buchanan Street Partners, please visit our website at buchananstreet.com. Buchanan Street Partners, capital you can count on.